I'm going to call our special select board meeting of Tuesday, November 17th to order, and it's special because we moved it up a week so that we wouldn't meet on the week of Thanksgiving. First item is approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. I'll point out that we do have cause for executive session following the select board meeting. Are there any other changes? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the agenda as drafted, signify with a thumbs up. Next is approval of minutes of our November 10th regular select board meeting.
Moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any amendments to those minutes? Seeing a lot of no head shaking. Okay. All in favor of approving the minutes as drafted, signify with a thumbs up. Very good. Citizen comments. Chris, is there anyone on that would like to comment on something that is not on the agenda?
Brian, I see no raised hands at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, boy, I take that back. I have Tom Hanley. Okay, Tom?
Okay, I think I'm here.
You're here, Chief.
All right. We just wanted to take a minute here at the board meeting. We wanted to recognize two of our citizens here in the town with a Civilian Service Award. And the Civilian Service Award just reads, for devotion and dedication that demonstrated selflessness and initiative for their part in assisting our officers in the apprehension of a suspect engaged in felonious criminal activity. Back on September 1st, late at night, they had run into one of our officers and were talking when our officer got a report of a burglary in progress in an apartment nearby. He went there, and instead of just getting in their trucks and leaving, they went and parked across the street knowing he'd be alone. They waited there until other officers arrived, were able to assist. The person had already left by the time they got there. But while they were there, the two fellas got a person came up and said, somebody's breaking into the Dunkin' Donuts. And sure enough, somebody had tried to throw a concrete block through the window and had fled when the window didn't break. Our officers then went there. Devin and David then went around the block onto South Pleasant Street, and this person had fled and went over, broke into a car there, and stole a gas can, and then started running away. So they just kind of followed him and kept an eye on him. They saw where he went and hid, so they flagged the officers down. They had a radio in their car. They're both members of MREMS, and they had a radio in their car. They were able to communicate with the officers and direct them there. When the officers approached, the guy got up and ran, and the foot chase ensued. Devin picked up one of the officers in his truck, and they drove out ahead of the guy and were able to make an apprehension on him. So, I mean, these guys could have just gone their way. It was getting late at night. They didn't have to do any of this. So we wanted to recognize them, and I don't know if they're here. I don't know if Chris sees them. I gave them both the link to come on, but
I see Devin, Tom. Let me bring him in. I missed the name of the second person. I'm sorry.
David Fuller.
David Fuller. Okay.
He's here too.
Excellent.
Anyway, we do these Civilian Service Awards periodically. We've given a number of them over the years. High school students who have done something extraordinary. The folks that pulled that pilot out of the burning airplane. These kind of things that generally go unnoticed, when we become aware of them, we like to recognize folks for their service. And these two guys were pretty extraordinary.
Excellent recognition, Chief.
Chief Hanley, this is Dave Fuller. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Dave.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. I'm honored, and I know Devin, I think, is on as well. You know, I just want to point out that we have an extraordinary group of police officers in Middlebury, and under Chief Hanley's leadership, we really are, we're blessed to have such a great group in town. So, you know, Devin and I were in the right place at the right time, and, you know, again, we work alongside them a lot with MREMS, but again, just really honored, and Chief Hanley, thank you. Really appreciate it.
Great. I'll have your awards. We'll get them up to MREMS or find you guys.
Great. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thanks for the board.
Just a fun Saturday night.
Yes, it was.
You call me, please. I want to be with you when you do it again.
We'll pick you up.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Chief.
Chief, do you have video tonight or are you without video?
I don't see an icon to turn the video on.
I will take care of that in just a moment. I did not bring him in as a panelist, so let me take a moment to do that.
Well, you guys know what I look like anyway. It's
Well, those that are watching like to see.
Okay, he should be coming back.
So there we go. Now we get the face of the wise police chief and emergency management director. I got another email yet today, Chief, just saying, I hope you guys realize how fortunate we are to have Chief Hanley. And that was very nicely done, how you highlighted what the governor said and brought back comments from previous. And I think the community continues to appreciate the way you frame the message on a daily basis.
Thank you.
With that, I'll give you the mic to bring us up to date.
All right. In spite of all the dour news around the state, another 95 cases overnight. Most of them are occurring in Washington and Orange counties and Chittenden counties. Addison County remains fairly stable, and that's a credit to the folks that live here. Middlebury is incredibly stable as well. I think that's just a credit to the folks that live here and that are taking this serious. When we look at Rutland County with 52 cases in the last 14 days, Washington with 265 in the last 14 days, Orange County with 82, Lamoille with 46, even Little Orleans up in the Northeast Kingdom with 36 cases in the last 2 weeks. We don't compare with that. We've had 25. Some of them are some residuals from an outbreak in Shoreham. Other than that, we're in good shape. What we're seeing statewide is just pretty much mobility and travel among people who are infected are bringing their infections all over the place. This latest run for the last week and a half is all traced back primarily to that Washington County outbreak, what they call the hockey outbreak. That expanded right to St. Mike's and kind of blew up all over the state. It just shows you how quick this can go when people aren't paying attention. This week, just to make sure, we've told the state that we'll take care of compliance visits here in Middlebury, so we don't have state officers doing it. I think it's better that our officers do this, and we're going to start that tomorrow. Again, have not seen a lot of non-compliance, although we did get about a dozen complaints this week from some repeats from the same business. So we'll focus on that and try to get everybody up to speed. These aren't enforcement contacts. Again, these are just telling them what the rules are, making sure everybody knows and give them an opportunity to come along. The governor is insisting that he is going to keep schools open, which is good. What we've seen is the schools are not the ones that are causing these outbreaks. Schools are run very well. They're very well managed. They're following the rules. They're doing great stuff. Starting next week, we hope we're going to have 7-day testing. Middlebury has been selected for one of the pods to do the 7-day testing. It's going to be primarily afternoons and one evening a week. It'll be running 7 days a week. They're going to start surveillance testing now on some critical folks. We're going to be getting surveillance tested probably every couple of weeks, just because of the exposures we have, every day with our business. So if one of us gets an infection, we can stop it in its tracks. So healthcare workers, teachers, and other critical folks like that will be getting tested specifically, but this is open to the general public. So the more tests we go, the more we can identify this virus at its start, we can keep it from spreading. And we had the 2 college students reported today with COVID. Unfortunate, but really, we've been very lucky with the amount of students here and kind of movements around town. They've been doing exceptional. And I give this college and the students a lot of credit for everything they've done, because it's been wonderful. And as I said, the numbers show it. Right now, Middlebury has very low numbers. We have a total of 11 into last week for the whole year, and pretty healthy community. And it's because people are paying attention and they're doing the best they can. And that's about it.
Thanks, Chief. Dan?
Yeah, Chief, every time I hear about the compliance checks, the only thing I see listed next to the compliance checks is accommodations and restaurants. And, I think the stores are actually a lot busier than the restaurants and the accommodations right now. In fact, accommodations have gone significantly down and critical. And when the news started to break last Wednesday and Thursday, I know that, my buddies woke up and found out that 50% of their weekend reservations for restaurants had canceled. So it's just entered in kind of into a bleak zone for them. So I would encourage it, not just singling out the accommodations in restaurants for compliance checks, but I think stores should be, and other businesses should be checked for compliance also. If
Oh,
they're
you're
gonna-
absolutely right.
Yeah.
We've seen the restaurants here with a high level of compliance. We do know
Yes.
that one that isn't keeping a log, and we'll just pay a visit there and just ask them to keep a log. But no, the restaurants and the lodging are not a problem. We'll just do a
No.
courtesy visit anyway, but we do have a list of, especially the convenience stores, where there's been some lack of compliance, to say the least. And a couple of reports of employees here or there not wearing masks. That's usually fixed by just a visit with management. So these are going to be pretty low level, pretty not heavy-handed things. We just got some information for them. We want to remind them too that there's the governor's orders, and then there's OSHA or VOSHA, and there's also the Department of Liquor Control, which do wield a heavy hand. I mean, if they're not masking their employees when they're supposed to, and they get a visit from VOSHA, you know what the fines are. They're not a $200 slap on the wrist. They're up in the thousands. So we want to make sure that they understand that they may not want to wear masks, they may not like it, but they're going to have an issue with VOSHA. I just pulled down the flyers from the federal OSHA on this, and they're looking at really trying to step up compliance in that way.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions of Chief?
I just have a comment, Chase. I wanted to thank David and Devin for looking out for the neighbors. I just want to acknowledge some other neighbors of mine. Last week, I had somebody try to get into my store a couple times and tried to start a fire in the back of my store. And the folks at the gas station next door, right away they swung into action and they called the police, and thankfully nothing bad happened. This gentleman actually at 1:30 in the morning tried to, I'm looking on my camera and he's trying to get into my store. The next morning when the gas station people told me that we had to call the police because somebody was trying to light a fire in the back of the store, I go on my camera and he's actually trying to get into my store. So thanks the neighbors for looking out for all the businesses. And thank you again, David and Devin, for doing what you did.
Yeah, fair. Thank you. Those two individuals have been a bit of a problem in the past week. They have been trespassed out of just about every business in town. And this is something I didn't bring up, but we are seeing an importation here of homeless people from as far away as Tennessee. They're coming in from out of state. We're working with the shelter on it. They're showing up at the shelter. They're showing up at our door. So we're trying to deal with it. They need to go to Harborview up in South Burlington, I think it is. Shelburne, somewhere up over Harborview. There's a quarantine station there for homeless folks. So we've got arrangements to make sure they come down and pick them up and bring them to Harborview. But we've had a lot of those in the past couple of weeks. We're getting more and more.
Yeah.
And these are two guys that are part of it.
Okay. If there's nothing more, then thanks, Chief. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Next is our FY 2022 budget and town 2021 town meeting preparations. And first is discussion of a letter that we received from United Way of Addison County Executive Director Helena Van Vorst regarding social service agency petitions for town funding. And Kathleen, do you want to cover that? You want me to cover it?
Sure. So some towns follow the state statute and require the social service agencies to submit a petition of 5% of the registered voters in order to get on the ballot. And that is for each year. So in Middlebury, we allow people to, or nonprofit agencies to petition the first time. And if they're requesting the same amount, we include them in the budget subsequent years once it's approved. But other towns do require a petition each and every year. Helena, not knowing what our policy was, sent us a letter like she did to all Addison County towns, asking them to waive the petition requirements for the current fiscal year. So we have not been approached by anyone, but you may want to think about what your response would be for the social service agency funding as to whether you would require a petition for a new agency.
And we don't necessarily need to make a decision on that tonight, but Kathleen has laid out a number of options for us. Should someone approach, should a social service agency approach us for new funding, or would that apply also? It wouldn't apply for an increase in funding, would it? It's just for new funding we would be discussing.
It would be for new funding. The board has taken the stance that it would consider increased funding and could include that either on its own initiative, or if it did not support it, the agency could petition the town.
Yeah,
for an increase.
we did something different for the MREMs because it was such a significant jump. But we'll still plan on having them present to us over Zoom on the rotational basis. So just be thinking about what you feel is a fair way of dealing with that. We typically do not have not gotten a lot of new ones, and so maybe we won't have call for this. Anybody want to comment on that?
Before we move on, in a similar vein, just received a letter from Elderly Services letting us know that they will not be requesting their $5,000 allocation this year due to their financial circumstances. But they would like to be able to resume with funding next fiscal year in FY23. That sounds like a very reasonable and generous approach. And so I'd like to respond to them that, yes, they can take a year off.
Is there any needed discussion, or are we okay to have somebody make a motion to support that, or give a fist bump to them for supporting our challenging financial situation this year?
I'll make a motion to fist bump the offer to skip this year. How about that?
I'll bump the other fist.
All in favor, signify with thumbs up. Okay, it's all approved, Kathleen. I'm glad that they're in a good financial situation, and we can use all the help that will help do some of the other things that we're going to be challenged that are certainly desirable and deserving. So, any other comments on this item? Okay, we're going to move on then. Dave Silberman had asked us to request to consider adding an article to the town meeting warning that would state, shall the town of Middlebury permit the operation of cannabis retailers and integrated licensees, which are licensed by the state of Vermont pursuant to Act 164 of 2020, subject to such municipal ordinance and regulation as the select board may lawfully adopt and implement. And there's two ways to get on to get onto our Australian ballot for town meeting. And one would be if the select board puts an initiative on there, and the other is a citizen generated petition initiative. So the recent passage of Act 164, creating a retail cannabis market in Vermont, is what's driving this. And I did get some notes that I should share with you from Jennifer from Jen on zoning concerns, and hadn't had a chance to really look at it completely. And I think this appearing on the agenda was maybe a little bit shorter notice, and she's got a very full plate here in the last few weeks with everything else that we've had her doing. But she is concerned about whether that we can adequately do all the controls through zoning, and wanted to research some of that. So I'll open it up to board discussion. Maybe Dave would like to make a statement for the board to consider.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Brian. I'll keep it very quick. We as a town have a struggling retail sector, and I think that this kind of retail, while new and different, is not all that new or different, really. Cannabis is sold in town on a regular basis. It's just sold in parking lots instead of in stores. And I think the town would benefit by bringing those sales into a regulated marketplace, being sold by people who check ID and have the products undergo testing and accurate labeling and appropriate restrictions. And bring tax revenues to the town as well. Middlebury is well positioned, as opposed to most towns in the state, to actually receive tax revenues. The legislature, in its wisdom, decided not to provide for local revenue sharing, but they did apply the sales tax, which means that the existing 1% local option tax will apply in Middlebury's case. So good for us. And I think that's enough. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Thoughts from the board? Heather?
So I don't think that I'm in favor at this point in time, given current world events, that we would move this at a select board level to the Australian ballot. Just given recent history on cannabis and the public's interest in commenting on that, I feel like I couldn't support the select board making the decision without some input from the public on whether they would want to see that or not. And given the time, so I guess not knowing how the rest of the board feels on signatures and the petitioning, I think I would also appeal to Dave that we consider, or that he consider, holding off on this for the 2021 town meeting, only because of the pandemic. I'm concerned that we can't have the kind of public engagement that I would really like to see before the Australian ballot on something like this, just given the history of people wanting to weigh in on this topic and our ability to accommodate that kind of discussion by Zoom. You can certainly still go ahead and get the required petitions and have it on the ballot, but I guess I would like to request that you consider that hard given the current situation. So I think that's all I'll probably say on that. I do want the town to be able to weigh in on it. I just don't know that it's I feel like this is a need, excuse me. I feel like this is a want and not really a need right now. And I really want us to concentrate staff time and energy and our time on the things that we really need to work on right now, and not necessarily the wants. And I think maybe a year from now would be a better time I'm hoping to have a better time to have this conversation.
Okay, thanks, Heather. Any other comments? Lindsay? Chris, do you have the ability to just go in and unmute?
I don't know that I do.
No, I've
Chris,
got
you're-
it.
There you
Yeah.
go.
Sorry, it's not my computer. I just want to be sure I understand the process. So what Dave is asking is for us as a board to vote to put it to Australian ballot. Correct?
That's correct.
Right. And then were we to do that, we would need to have a public hearing prior to town meeting so that people could weigh in? Or no?
Kathleen, typically, we give an opportunity to discuss whether it be at the town meeting or before the town meeting, don't we?
So your question is whether you can put it on the warning without a public hearing. Is that your question?
Yeah, is a public hearing normally part of the process? And when does that happen?
You would not typically have a public meeting on something. You
Okay.
would on a warrant article.
Okay.
I
It would
don't
just
know.
be on there and then people voting would be them giving their
and-
opinion on it.
We're talking about later on how we may have town meeting and what
Right.
that might look like this year, and as to whether there's going to be any opportunity for interaction with the
Right.
voters in presentation.
Right, right. I mean, I guess I do understand Heather's concerns because there's not going to be much opportunity for a conversation. I guess my next question would be if we put it on the ballot for Australian vote and the town shot it down, can it go back on the next year? If people wanted it to. Yeah, okay. So it's not like we've nixed it forever. I guess I'm fine either way. I certainly would be fine with it being on the ballot this year, given that it's not going to take staff time for a meeting. And it's certainly a way of gauging people's interest. I think it would then be up to citizens to share information with the rest of the community about what that means. But yeah, I wouldn't have a problem putting it on this year, voting to put it on. I wouldn't want citizens having to get signatures together at this time. So if it's either or, I'd rather we just do it so that nobody's passing around a petition. But that's just my opinion. Thanks.
Thanks, Lindsay. Dan?
Yeah, I appreciate Heather's input and agree with her. I also believe that this is either an all in or all against type vote. There's usually nobody that's thinking yes, maybe. It's either they're either solid in or they're solid against this. And I don't feel comfortable as a select board voting this to put it before the vote currently, because I would really like to see and think it's important to hear what the community feels about this. And so I would strongly push for having the signatures, and I think you can get the signatures electronically. So I don't think that's an issue. But at least I would like to see the citizens push it to have it as a vote, and not us as a select board going in it. And then I think if we do get it on the ballot, I would love to see some open some type of meeting or something where that's the only topic we talk about. I would love to have some type of community engagement on this, and just instead of just voting to have it or getting the petition, putting it on the ballot and voting for it. I would really like to have a lot of public engagement, and I would really love to hear from the citizens what they feel.
Thanks, Dan. Nick?
Well, I think here, as I see this, and Dave actually had brought this to me, it's one of two directions. It's either we agree to put this on the Australian ballot, or Dave goes off and gets the necessary prerequisite signatures, which I suspect probably would be able to do. So in either way, it ends up on the ballot. Now, there's nothing in this language. I mean, it does give the regulatory capability to the town. And there's nothing that actually specifies that we have to have the standard, if you will, or the ordinance in place by the time this issue comes out. So if we say, for sake of argument, it gets passed in April or March, then it's up to the town to still, and with community input, to come up to what the ordinance would be and where we would or would not be comfortable. But this is really just asking the fundamental question of, would we be willing to have these kind of retail establishments in town? And then we go through the details of where they would be afterwards. I don't see it as taking anybody's time in advance of the town meeting. So I'm personally comfortable with it. The law has been passed out, and now it's a chance for us to figure out how to manage it.
Okay, thanks, Nick. Farhad, did you have any comments?
I am fine either way. I agree with Dan's point that there should be a public discourse when it comes to a matter like this. There should be a conversation. We should listen to everybody. I had an email today. I had a couple of my customers who had voiced their opinion on this subject. So I don't know if we go ahead and put it on the ballot as a town board. I don't know if people will have a chance to voice their opinion. I think it's important to hear everybody, in my opinion. So.
Okay, thanks, Farhad. Heather had something more?
So, Kathleen, we aren't required to have a public information meeting, but typically when we've had items on the Australian ballot, we provide some kind of informational, discussion. And I just think if it ends up on the ballot, not knowing what our town meeting looks like, and how we're going to structure that and how long, if this becomes a lively topic of discussion, I don't know that I want to only leave the time that we've allotted in whatever town meeting looks like for a ballot. So I'm just thinking ahead a little bit. I agree with what Dan said. If we do decide to put it on, or the voters decide they want to put it on, scheduling some kind of public information meeting, something separate from town meeting, would be important. And I just feel, given the current circumstances, that it couldn't. I mean, maybe it could be well done, but I don't know. I'm just concerned about how that all looks at this time, and also just that there's not necessarily an urgency to do this right now.
Nick?
Well, we've had in past with other issues that have come up, whether it was the town office building or some of the other larger events, we've had in advance public information sessions. So I don't see any reason why after we get through the majority of the budget cycle, we had that little period in there where things quiet down a little bit before town meeting, where we couldn't schedule a chance for an information session at a board meeting, 15 minutes or 10, 15 minutes, whatever, to go along and explain. So the voters have more knowledge on what this really means in an unbiased manner. I mean, that seems plausible, and precedent's already been set many times before. So if that's something that is important, and I feel it would be, to help just, an educated voter is always the best voter. So I'm in favor of approving this. I personally see is no problem with the way it's written, but we could easily have that information session scheduled to address some of the points that Heather's talking about.
Dave, can you just refresh our memory when they can legally start selling cannabis?
The bill states that licenses are to be issued no later than May of 2022 for the integrated licensees, and no later than October of 2022 for both small scale growers and, I'm sorry, I misspoke. Small scale growers also get licensed no later than May of 2022. Retailers who are not existing medical dispensaries would get licensed no later than October 2022.
And when you brought this up, there was a rationale for doing it this year versus 2022. Can you remind us what your thinking was on that?
Yeah, a couple of different things, Brian. I think it's important for the town to get started on the process of figuring out what local regulations you want to put in place. And that process may take you some time and some manpower. But I think, you're going to need to think about appropriate zoning for non-retail establishments, which you do not have the ability to opt into. Those are just allowed subject to zoning. So manufacturing, growing, wholesale businesses, testing labs, those are the other kinds of licenses. Those are allowed by right, but you do have the ability to implement zoning regulations. But for retail, whether or not you need to address it, I think the town ought to know whether or not it needs to address that topic. And so I think better for you guys to have that direction from the voters earlier than later. From the perspective of a potential retailer looking to establish a store, I'm not that person. But from that perspective, the more lead time, the better. Opening up a retail store, look, that takes a lot of time and effort under any circumstance. But in this heavily regulated industry, where we're going to see a whole new regulatory regime come up with new rules that have, have not yet been written, but will be written soon, and we imagine will be extensive. A lot of rules around security, and I mean, security is really the most important thing, especially with all cash businesses, until Congress does something about that. I think potential entrepreneurs will want to know early on that Middlebury is a town that's going to welcome them or not, and so that they can make their appropriate investment well in advance. If we don't consider this until March of 2022, the chances of somebody picking Middlebury for October 2022, I think, is a lot lower than if we declare ourselves in 2021 that we are welcoming to these businesses and begin the process of putting in appropriate zoning regulations and figuring out where these businesses belong and where they don't.
And what's our date, Kathleen, that we have to put the warning out this year?
You're muted.
Last Tuesday in January.
Do you recall what Jen's concern is, Kathleen?
I don't.
Could, I guess I would suggest we take this discussion tonight and we push it back and bring it back when we and give Jen an opportunity to clarify to the board what her concerns are I mean, I'm not comfortable until certainly if our zoning administrator is not certain that she grasps the Act 164 and how that's going to how that works within Middlebury. And so I'd like to hear from her before you vote, so that you at least know what control the town does or does not have over where an establishment is placed. And I think that was part of the concern, if I remember right, that she had expressed.
So just to note that the statutory deadline for petitions is Thursday, January 14th, 47 days before town meeting. And your last select board meeting in January is January 26th. And the warning has to be posted by January 31st.
Okay. I think we've got a mostly split board right now. I guess I wouldn't feel comfortable if I think if it's going to go from the board, it ought to be, everybody should be at least knowing exactly how it impacts. And that's part of that education process. So I think we owe it to educate ourselves a little bit more. I don't know, thoughts from the board? Nick?
Well, I think the one thing I would just like to reemphasize for Jen, and I don't know if this is one of her concerns, but she's so good at doing so many things, but you gotta do so many things at once, is that the requirement for her to come up with the assistance of the citizenry of the town, what the ordinance would look like is not necessarily, it's not mandated by the same date of the vote on this issue. So if she's concerned about just not having enough time to do it before town meeting, I think she should know that she can be comfortable knowing that's not the case. It will take effort after if it's an approved vote by the voters, but it's nothing that has to happen before then.
I also hear a desire from the board to make sure that it's a public process. What would the calendar look like as far as opportunities maybe in February to have a board meeting where there was an hour or 40 minutes or something? Give it over to that time, Kathleen.
One thing to keep in mind that may be in play more this year than other years is absentee balloting as well. So we should keep that in mind with the timing of the public information meeting as well. I think that those ballots would be available right after the select board signs the warning, so that first week in February. So we could have a special meeting the first week in February, if you like. I think there's the 9th is the second meeting in February. So just have a special meeting early in the month if you wanted.
Okay. Heather?
So Brian, you do have a couple of hands raised in the, from attendees,
Oh,
but it would be nice, it would be nice if we're going to push this out, to have some kind of, analysis between Jen and even if we don't, have an answer, but if it gets on the ballot and the town does vote in favor of it, what are we looking at in terms of staff time to put together what's needed, to have a retail establishment in Middlebury? And, what do our priorities look like for, 2021, 2022, and is there staff capacity there at all? So it might also be helpful to have, some estimate there. I mean, I have no idea what would be involved in if the town did vote yes to getting something in place to allow that to happen. And then where does that money come from? And should we be putting something in the budget? Anyway, I just have a lot of questions about how this all works. Anyway, you do have 3 questions from attendees if the board is wanting to hear from them.
Let's hear from the attendees before, and then we'll come back. Chris, I'm not sure who's raising their hands, but if you could. Maybe
Sure,
let-
Brian. First on the list, we have Susan Shashok. Susan, go ahead, please.
Hi, Susan.
Hi there. It's your friendly moderator here. I just wanted to weigh in and say that there was a couple questions about whether if you went to Australian ballot, would you have to have an informational meeting? And yes, you do. You have to have an informational meeting within the 10 days before an Australian ballot. And that's with this consideration that they're allowing select boards to make this decision. So I just wanted to confirm that's where the state is expecting that debate to happen. So
Susan, clarification then, if you're going to have early voting, is it within 10 days of the start of early voting?
that's a great question. I think if you're going to have early voting and you're going to have your that informational meeting closer, you're going to miss that debate. So, and that is a consideration. And I think one of the things I talked with Kathleen over the weekend, I sent her a note because I saw an article on Friday, is that there is still not good clarification from Vermont League of Cities and Towns on whether you can't hold a virtual meeting, which is something to consider too. So if it's still in play. And so if you're going to have, it's sort of like everything else. If you're going to vote early, you may miss something as it gets closer. And that happens in the general as well. You know, your candidate may do something that you don't like, but you've already voted for them.
I did see something from VLCT that they were recommending not to be voting virtually.
Correct, but it's still in play. So what we found out on Friday is they talked to the Rutland newspaper and said that they really aren't sure and are working with the Secretary of State. So it looks like that, but they haven't quite decided yet. They thought they had, but they haven't.
All right.
So I've been talking a lot with Jim Douglas because he's the moderator of ACSD, and we've been tracking it quite a bit and just trying to be available for your questions and the debate.
Okay, thanks, Susan.
Sure.
Okay, next we have Amy Ryan.
Hi, Amy.
Good evening. I think it's a good discussion to have, and I just wanted to weigh in from a downtown retail standpoint. Right now, you may or may not know, we have at last count about 7 empty storefronts downtown. And if anybody walks downtown who's not from Middlebury or the area and takes a look at the offerings, it's all pretty much the same. You know, there's not a whole lot of diversity in the sense of who the downtown stores are appealing to. And I think something like this creates some of that diversity. I also think from a real estate perspective, we've seen a number of people moving to this area. And a lot of them are looking for business opportunities, not to say that this is specifically the business opportunity that they're looking for, but I think it's safe to say that it probably does appeal to some of the folks who are moving here. And last, I think to Dave's point, or somebody mentioned the timeline associated with creating zoning so that anything that happens in our downtown that's new and different happens safely and effectively. I think the time is now to support something like this so that it's done properly and with eyes wide open.
Okay, thanks, Amy.
Thank you.
Next we have Fred Dunnington. Go ahead, Fred.
Evening, Fred.
Good evening. Your town charter gives you authority to enact ordinances regarding public safety through the police department, not just zoning. Zoning is actually a fairly clumsy tool for some of the things that might come up in regards to safety. And I wouldn't necessarily rely solely upon just Jen, but I think Chief Hanley might have some valuable input to how this might be regulated. Maybe some tools are some of it might be done through zoning and some of it might be done through police ordinances.
Okay, thanks, Fred.
Next up is Matthew Delialobo. Go ahead, Matthew.
Evening, Matthew.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for doing this. I think I'm unmuted. No, I just wanted to, I guess I was also going to say what Amy was saying as a business owner close to downtown and in downtown with our other shop. I think people that I've already talked to about Middlebury in general, I think we see this new era that we're entering with the downtown being totally renovated and beautiful, but with, like Amy said, those 7 open storefronts, like, I mean, we're entering a time where we could really seize the opportunity to bring new successful business into this town and really be ahead of the game on this. But I do respect that people should be educated and should be talking about it. But I think that happens on a day-to-day basis, as well as larger, more public happenings that could be put together. I'm sure people would be even willing to help do something like that. But yeah, I just wanted to weigh in as well as a business owner. I think it's super important to the future of our town to get new stuff here, essentially. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Matthew.
Okay, and lastly, we have Becky. I don't see a last name, but if Becky, you would identify yourself, please, for the public record.
Good evening, Becky. Becky, you're muted.
Yeah, am I muted now?
No, you're good now.
No, it's Becky Dayton.
How are you?
Thank you. I'd like to just echo what Amy and Matthew both just said. I think Middlebury is suffering from a real shortage of retail businesses. I think this is an opportunity for the town. I don't think we should drag our heels, and frankly, it makes me a little uncomfortable that the select board would kind of kick the can down the road because they're waiting to hear what the zoning administrator might have to say about it. So I think you should move forward with it. And yeah, it's my opinion.
Okay, thank you, Becky. Dave, you had something more?
I had to find that mute button. I wanted to let Heather know in response to her question of where kind of costs and where, kind of staff time money might come from. I wanted to make sure that you're aware there's a provision in the law that says part of the application fees that the licensees, any licensee, whether it's retail or otherwise, has to pay will be a local fee. It's going to be assessed by the state. It's going to be paid to the host municipality. And that fee by law is supposed to be set by the control board, by the state control board, at a level that compensates the town for its administrative and regulatory expenses associated with hosting that business. So at least on paper, I don't know what reality will be, but at least on paper, there's supposed to be a revenue stream to the town early on in the process because it comes at the application stage.
Thanks for the clarification, Dave. Any other comments or questions, Dan?
Yeah, I find it really interesting that, and I mean, this is why we need to have a public discourse on this. But I really find it really interesting of people that I really respect and understand is centered to the business in town. But I'm surprised that we are considering creating the resurgence of the economic vitality of the downtown based on a store that sells cannabis. And I'm uncomfortable with basing an economy around thinking that's going to create a resurgence of stores around that thought. That's just an uncomfortable feeling to me. But I also, I would love to see some data based that shows that could really happen. And I'm not sure what kind of environment that's going to create in downtown. I'm not sure what the downtown is going to look like. I know I'm never going to go in and buy cannabis, but there's lots of people that will. I just don't see it creating a whole lot of shopping down there. And again, most important, I'm just uncomfortable with basing our downtown economy on that and our hopes on that. I would hope that we would have better economic reasons, better thoughts, and a more diverse thoughts of what to do.
Thanks, Dan. Any other comments from the board? Nick?
I appreciate actually the comments that we had from the people who are in the trenches in downtown. And Fred Dunnington, you're absolutely correct. And that would be part of the whole process of trying to figure out where these things go. I don't specifically, and this is the observations of a traveler and one who spends a lot of time in going to places where these ordinances have long existed, Denver and Portland and a number of other cities. And I don't really see it as something where you build an economy around a cannabis retailer. It's another retailer. It does generate some additional foot traffic, but then there seems to be almost an exponential growth in other retailers and restaurants, coffee shops, things like that just grow out of this one attraction. And I've seen it happen, and I can think of one particular neighborhood in Denver, which was pretty run down. And there are one or two shops on this large street, but it's also turned the whole segment of that part of town around into a kind of a dynamic community. And I would suspect the vast majority of the people are not going to the cannabis shops, but they're going to some of the other things that just happen to become offshoots of it. So again, I at this point, I see it as something that makes sense to me. I mean, the law has been approved, and this is a chance for us to then really get serious about where we want to have these and what regulations we're going to be. Because the other concern I have is that as a law, if we are in the best position in many respects of the whole county to be able to manage this professionally. Otherwise, these shops are going to go somewhere else, and to a place where they won't necessarily be as well managed because they don't have the professional staff. So to me, this becomes kind of the safest way and the most orderly way to manage this issue that we've been given. And so I agree. I don't want to kick the can down the road. I think we should put it out there. We can have an information session so the voters are at least familiar with what they were being asked to vote on, and let's see where it goes from there. And then after that, we would go through the process of developing that management protocol for it. But my person to say is I don't want to kick the can down the road. Let's keep progress going on in so many ways.
Lindsay?
Yeah, I'm just going to echo what Nick is saying. And I also feel pretty strongly that not allowing the voters the opportunity to weigh in on this on the ballot this year is doing them a disservice, because it's pushing everything back for a really long time. And this isn't a new subject. I believe the town has had conversations around this issue, maybe not exactly, in terms of retail establishment, but we've certainly had public forums around cannabis in the past. I don't think anything is going to come out of a public discussion before the vote, other than some people will be for it and some people will be against it. I think the real meat of the conversation is going to happen if we decide we do want to have this kind of retail available in the town. Then we need to hash out the details, and I think that'll come after the fact. So again, I just think the voters should have the opportunity to have this on the ballot one way or the other this year.
Okay. Interesting thought about when the real discussion takes place. If there's no other comments, is there a motion somebody wants to make, or right now I think we have a split board. We don't have a seventh member, which is part of why I was not that I was looking to kick the can down the road and not have a decision for this particular town meeting, but I'm wondering if the board needs another couple weeks of deliberation, on the side and with constituents to feel comfortable about where the board should be going. So,
I think so.
Nick?
I think that's a fair way to Brian. I don't think we're going to have a seventh member seated in time, are we, Kathleen? To do this in time. So that's probably an issue there. But I think I want to say I've largely made up my mind on this because I've been thinking about this for a while. But as we all know, in this business is we may hear something new and make it subject to change. I think in fairness. And I was ready to make a motion, but I think in fairness, why don't we hold off to the next meeting? Let's give everybody a chance to sort of digest what we heard. I'm sure we're going to get respective calls on this from both sides, but actually it's like three sides of the story, and invariably. So I think that's a wise approach, Brian, and rather than rush this, but also know that for those who have participated and brought this forward, it's not a kick the can down the road. It's a matter of just a little bit more time for us each to respectively deliberate. And I think that's a wise and a fair approach. So I would support that, and we can hopefully take it up for a vote next meeting.
Okay, and I do ask you to talk amongst those that you're close with in the community and come back to the next board meeting. I would like to just zero down any questions. If there's any questions that anybody has, if you could forward them to Kathleen so that we can have answers for those. And if I think we need Jen's input as well, what that concern was. And I hear the comments that Fred made, and they certainly make sense to me. I don't know if there's a legal something that we're missing, but I think we owe it to at least have a board position, and I don't see a position formed tonight, so that's why I'd prefer not to vote on it until there's a stronger position. Heather?
So even if the board decides not to forward it as a board item on the ballot, David could still get signatures needed. And I would be fine with an electronic, signature, something that Ann could, verify, actual on the voter list for Middlebury. But what better way to encourage it to be on the ballot by showing the support of having the signatures, especially if the board may be split on the board making the choice. So, I think I still have reservations about COVID and all that, but anyway, I think it would be wise to maybe consider going that direction.
Okay. Well, this will be early on our agenda. We'll knock this out before we get into budget next time, because and it may be a long meeting, so come prepared. A little coffee by your side. Thanks, Dave. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I just I don't think that the law allows signature gathering electronically. So look, I appreciate the board's time today. and I will continue to gather signatures, but I'll hold off submitting until after your next meeting to respectfully give you additional time to consider the issue. Again, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Appreciate your time.
Sorry, if I misunderstood from the information Kathleen provided from the previous discussion. I thought electronic signatures were allowed, so sorry if I had gave wrong information or I misunderstood.
It's all changing.
Kathleen, Australian ballot discussion?
So may want to let Susan in for this
Oh, yeah.
discussion as well.
Okay.
Just basically wanted to introduce the passage of S354 by the legislature, which allows for Australian ballot voting for any and all municipal buildings in 2021 by an action of the select board. Just making you aware that that is available. I think as Susan alluded to, we're still seeing this situation still evolving. So not in a point to make a decision now, I don't think, Susan, but we are watching to see what our options are for a town meeting.
Okay. And if you get, it sounds like you're in discussion with those in the know too, Susan, on all, just keep us in the loop on what's going on and so since we don't have to make a decision now, we might as well just let the information develop and flow in. I don't see where we have a lot of input that's needed on this until we get close into the election.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm talking with Kathleen. Kathleen's gathering information. I'm gathering information. Jim Douglas is going to be dealing with it for ACSD, and the school has their recommendations. So I think it's, we're sort of putting it all together. I have studied what Brattleboro did for their representative town meeting in September. And so if we are allowed to go virtually and you want to talk about that, then I'm ready for that conversation too. And I think it's just a matter of what are we allowed to do? And then based on that, what do you want to do?
Okay. And I do suggest you make sure your Zoom skills are all practiced up because I don't see us not being virtual with the number of people who come to our town meetings. I don't see how we can.
I don't think there's a venue big enough to hold it in person.
No.
And I also, Jim and I talked about a hybrid version, and that sounds delightful, but it causes twice the amount of work and preparation, and also causes two conversations to go on at the same time that would have to get blended together. And as your moderator, I would not be looking forward to that at all. So, I mean, I think it really does come down, do you want to be virtual or do you want to go Australian ballot? And then, if you go Australian ballot, what does your informational meeting look like? And usually that doesn't, it's not voting. So it's supposed to be hosted by the select board. So it would be a very different animal than what we're used to.
Okay. All right. Well, stay tuned.
Thank you very much.
Is there a limit to how many people can attend on Zoom? I thought it was like 100 people, or can we have more?
We have a webinar license which allows up to 500.
Oh, 500. Okay.
Nick?
I think, well, the idealist in me says we're going to have a town meeting. The realist in me says that's incredibly unlikely. But just the same, let's take an idealistic situation is that this thing does get better. Is there a drop dead date when we have to determine when we're going to have it as either live or alternative?
Probably when we submit our warning.
Right, that would be the end of January.
There is that sort of December 31st date that's going around too, that you have to decide if you want to go Australian ballot or not. So we're still checking on that too.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Stay tuned.
I'm here with a lot of non-information.
Yes, we all are.
Thanks, Susan. Chris, can you bring Dan in?
Okay, Dan should be coming in.
Okay,
Dan, you there?
I'm here. Start video.
Try restarting you. There you go.
All right.
Evening, Dan.
Good evening, everyone. Okay, so a few things to go through tonight from the Infrastructure Committee meeting last week. The first one is request from Bill Kernan to install a radio repeater across the street from us at Public Works over up on the hill where our sand and salt shed is. There are some dead spots in town, and they've had some issues with safety concerns with plow drivers needing assistance and we don't get communication with them. So Bill's worked with Green Mountain Power to have a pole installed on the basically the ledge hill up from our salt sand storage. And then there's obviously the lines that need to be run to that. So there's a few parts to this project. The first one is, well, the cost of it is $10,517.41. So you would have to prove that. And the money is in the capital budget. It was approved last year. So the funds are there to do the project. So there's a few things that need to happen. You have to prove the proposal for the $10,517.41. And then Kathleen, you have to also authorize Kathleen to sign the radio repeater line agreement. And that has a payment of $8,406.66. That is part of the $10,000 and change that I already mentioned. And then you'll need to authorize Kathleen to work with town council to go through the easements that Green Mountain Power needs to do the work. So I think you have maybe in your packet the two basically the cost estimates from Green Mountain Power. There's $2,100.75 for installing the pole up on the ledge hill, and then there's $8,406.66. That is for the wiring to get it to those a couple poles up the hill. So if you agree with the project, the first step is to approve the cost proposal for $10,517.41.
I'll move to approve Green Mountain Power's cost proposal of $10,517.41 for the installation of a radio repeater on town-owned property across Route 7 from the Department of Public Works facility.
No second.
Moved and seconded. Any questions on that? Lindsay?
Yeah, I just want to be sure and I know it's further down the road talking about moving the facility, but will the pole be able to stay where we're putting it?
Yes.
You don't have to pay $10,000 again? Okay.
No, just quickly how these work. There's a small antenna on the top of our existing Public Works building, and that sends a signal across the road to the repeater, and the repeater then blasts it out.
Okay.
So when we move, you'd have the same process.
Okay. But the repeater will stay where it is regardless of what we wind up doing with that property.
Exactly.
Okay.
Nick, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just want to say this, I appreciate Bill doing this, because if we have areas where, Public Works is mission critical to the town. It's one of the key functions that we do. And on occasion, especially during the winter months, plows are emergency response vehicles on occasion as well. So again, I appreciate them doing this, and I see no reason why this shouldn't happen. I'm glad this has been brought to us.
Okay, any other comments or questions?
Brian, it looks like we have a question from, or a comment from Fred Dunnington.
Okay. Hey, Fred.
We have a communications tower on Chipman Hill that handles public services, or was supposed to afford the top position for that. And that has superior propagation throughout the town. Did you check out sending the signal from the Public Works facility to existing tower in Chipman Hill and putting the repeater on that?
I can't say that Bill has, but all I can say is from a few years ago, the Canadian government protested that consideration a few years ago.
The Canadians?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Fred. Canadian government, Dan, has that got that much reach?
I guess it does. There's a certain range that they can make comment on, and I guess that's where it came up some years ago. So don't know if it's still true, but it was then.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify with a thumbs up. Okay, motion carries. Heather, you want to make the second motion? I think Dan's already explained it.
Yep. I'll move to authorize Town Manager Kathleen to sign the radio repeater line agreement with Green Mountain Power, acknowledging the board's approval of a contribution in aid of construction payment of $8,406.66 for the installation of the repeater.
Second that. Okay, Lindsay has it.
Okay, any questions on this? Seeing none, all in favor signify with a thumbs up. Motion carries.
We'll also move to authorize Town Manager Kathleen Ramsey to sign, to work with council to initiate a Section 1061 notification process regarding the conveyance of municipal real estate in regard to Green Mountain Power's request for an easement to maintain facilities installed as part of the repeater project. And upon successful completion of the statutory requirements of the 1061 process, I further authorize Kathleen Ramsey, Town Manager, to execute the easement deed with Green Mountain Power.
Second.
Moved and seconded.
I was trying to let Nick do it.
No, that's yours.
Okay.
And I was going to let you do it. So that means Fahad's supposed to.
I just want you to go to,
All in favor signify with thumbs up. Okay. All right, Dan, next.
Yep. Next item is just for review. You have a summary from Judy Harris, updating report that we started back in 2015 when we started looking at the building reuse project down at the police station. Of course, we decided to do that first because those buildings were in dire need of a decision time. Are we going to use them or let them decay further? So we went ahead with a police department reuse project. And then, so her report basically updates, where we're at with what our needs are. We are looking at possibly purchasing a piece of land just north of our existing salt sand facility on the east side of Route 7. It's owned by Foster's Farm. And so we wanted to go back and update this report and make sure things kind of still fit. We're at the point where we're trying to position our building sizes and needs based on equipment and movements to see if that site will work. And then at some point, if it does, we'll come back to the board to go a little further. When you get some time, you want to take a look a little more at this thing. If you go to page 4 of the report, it kind of Judy summarizes our current activities on what we're doing. So that's kind of where we're at, but we wanted to get this out because at the infrastructure committee, we've learned that some of the members there, weren't with us in 2015, and I'm not sure if all of you were there or not, but since it's a project that's been going on for a few years, we thought it'd be best to get it updated and let you have a chance to take another look at it. So that's where we're at.
Questions on that, anyone? Okay, next, Dan.
Next is the capital improvement budget. And so I'm not going to talk through all of these requests. Hopefully you've had a chance to look through them. Kind of briefly skim. Oops. There you go. Okay. Kathleen, feel free to jump in and help me out if you think I need it. But first up is administration. There's some typical recurring set-asides that we do every year throughout the capital improvement budget. PCs and network replacement and administration. Kathleen is programmed in some sound and IT for the board meeting room, if we ever get back to that. And also some funds for doing some painting at the town offices. Public Works, again, some very typical recurring requests. Gravel roads is one of those. We talked a couple years ago, about starting to set some money aside for gravel road paving. So that's the start of that figure. Sidewalk program, you'll see that this is a third year of an increase. 3 years ago, we talked about increasing the set aside for sidewalk improvements, and so we're doing that. Same situation with highway construction. We're going to go from 391,381 up to 435,000. Again, that's the third year of a 5-year increase in setting money aside for paving of highway roads and other highway construction projects. The line 30 is the bond for the 2011 bond issue we took out. You'll see that slowly decreases over the years as the bond gets paid off. Down on the next page, rail platform, sidewalks, and parking. That's what our current engineer's estimate is for additional set aside we need to do that project. And this is a good time to point out that the state is saying that they will begin their rail project or the rail platform project in the spring. Initially, they thought it was going to go this fall. Obviously, that hasn't happened. I believe there's a fair amount of federal bureaucracy that has slowed that process down. So our portion of the project, which also includes the storm sewer on Maple Street, we'll get going on this probably in August. The state thinks they'll be done with their rail platform at September 1st. So we're going to stay out of the way, but we can do the storm sewer project somewhat concurrently. Stormwater projects, there's no specific project, but we talked about this last year that we would maintain $20,000 in a pigeonhole, if you will, for stormwater projects. It seems like sometimes there's a large recurring expense for a stormwater project. So we have a set aside for that. Salt storage building, Bill has programmed $15,000 for a few years to redo the structure and the cover for that building. Creek Road alignment, again, another $40,000 set aside till we can figure out exactly what we're going to do with that road. And then we programmed $85,000 for public works site planning. I had originally requested put in $200,000 in case we were ready to purchase a piece of property. Obviously, we're not there yet. So we've extended the 85 over 2 years, and that comes up to 170. The remaining 30,000 would come from the water department because they do have offices at the public works building. So all through this process, there will be cost sharing with the water department. Down for the tree program, $5,700, same as last year. Fire department, again, typical recurring costs for cameras and their meter replacement, their turnout gear, air packs. I think the only significant couple of the things on line 78 and 80 are actually the repeater on line 78 is a set aside that Dave started a year ago, and he started to program some money for security and door access. So a lot of his requests are to take care of recurring, expenses. So there's no large, hikes in requests any one year. It's a way to even out the capital requests. Library, again, hardware, peripherals, same thing. Typical requests. Heating and cooling, we've decided to push that off one more year. Trying to give the budget a little break from our economic situation. We do need to replace the fire alarm system, and Dana has been having some painting done on the exterior part of the building, and I believe this would be the last year of that project, of that process, to get all of that done. The next page is let's see, police department, line 108, again, annual set-asides for information technology equipment. Tom is looking for a replacement of a booking system. I believe this is a situation where the current system, communication with the state, was no longer supported, and there isn't a choice to spend the $19,000 to communicate with state records. We're starting to look ahead for future replacement of the HVAC units on that building. So this is a third year of starting to set aside for that. Let's see, down to the next page. Ongoing tennis court fund set aside, some tables for the pavilion. Bill's and Dustin are programming some replacements of the kiddie pool at the water park. Community building teen center, $10,000 for some maintenance upgrades. And then Curtis Park, again, some annual set-asides for those projects as they come due. Let's see. Recreation is looking for a pass card system. And I think that's about it for them. Next page, Emerald Ash Borer response. Again, $5,000 set aside annually for ash borer response needs. 167 is in yellow, $6,500. I believe that would be the payment for a bond.
Actually, Dan, that the 98-91 in this fiscal year was our first bond payment.
Right.
The $6,500 is anticipated for maintenance of those improvements.
Okay.
Over 10 years, they anticipated that it would be $65,000 based on the current sediment deposits that we're experiencing, the current rate of sediment deposits we're experiencing. So I divided that over 10 years, $6,500 a year.
Great, thanks. And just a comment on that, our share, as we anticipate, would be $500,000. We did get a state revolving loan fund, basically it'd be a grant for $200,000. So our $500,000 need is down to $300,000. So that total comes up to line 171. It's $1,438,219, slightly less than last year's request.
Just to thank you very much, Dan. That was a great rundown. Two things. In reviewing the library request for their new heating system, the timing did seem to work to push that off into the spring of 2022, Dan. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah.
Design
There's some.
and
There's,
bidding.
want me to go?
With the design and bidding of that project, that was where we were ending up.
Yeah, yeah. We're still in design, and Dana's going to have to work out how that's going to work with her staff, and of course, who knows what's going to happen with COVID and access to the building. So we're really not going to be ready for it until the following year. So it makes a lot of sense to schedule-wise to do that.
And another consideration is that it's likely we would need a bond vote for that $600,000 project. So we thought it would be best to delay a bond vote on that till 2022 town meeting, when we hopefully have town meeting in person. And
Yeah, we're finding out too that some of this materials and, for the heating systems are getting hard to get with COVID and production. So the pricing is a little hairy and availability. So putting it off a year is probably the smart thing to do with that.
And then a lot of people have been concerned about the lack of the tot lot over by Mary Hogan, and just wanted to assure everybody that Dustin has that on his radar screen for the spring of 2021. It is in this year's budget. The timing just didn't work out, again, due to lag in delivery time before the winter came for installing that.
Okay, any questions of Dan on this? Nick?
Well, it's a good point, Dan, you make, and everybody should hear that really well as far as getting materials and supplies. We're finding it out there in a lot of projects, fundamentally impossible. And then when you do get them, you can't find anybody to put them in. So that's a very wise decision, and I'm glad you made that, because otherwise it's not a very favorable market right now.
Okay. All right, if there's no other questions, thanks a lot, Dan. Appreciate the overview. Be
And
interested to see how it all pieces together as we get more of it.
And Kathleen did a little summary of changes that when we looked at, the infrastructure committee looked at it the first time. But at the bottom of that, I mean, Kathleen, do they have that in their packet?
We do.
Yeah, okay. So at the bottom, the most important thing is the tax rate, the tax impact. It's down by 1/10 of a penny from last year. So there you go.
You feel pretty good about that, don't you, Dan?
I gotta say, when we start to program things appropriately and budget properly, you don't have these peaks and valleys, and it just makes things a lot easier.
Yeah.
Yeah. Predictability is a good thing.
And this isn't, we've been doing it now for a number of years, and it's really starting to settle in pretty nicely.
Yeah, it's very, very sweet.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Chris, can you bring Karen and is this a neighbors together or?
Yes.
Yeah, so Nancy coming in, okay, yeah, I see Nancy coming in as well.
Hi, guys.
Evening, Karen.
How are you?
Hi, Nancy.
Hey, hi. So,
Kathleen, would you mind doing this screen share?
I'm getting there.
Thank you.
Take me a second.
My room isn't orange. I'm not sure why it's looking that way.
you actually always look orange. Yeah. That's funny. While Kathleen's getting that up, what we're here, we're giving you an update on where we are, what we've been doing. And the last time we were with you was, I don't know, early summer. And where we had a lot of challenges and we had to bring you up to date. But just to recap, we really had to rethink how to build our community and support businesses because of COVID, whereas at the same time, we had to make sure that our grant stayed true to its purpose, which is to mitigate the negative effects of the rail and bridge project. And we were not supposed to consider COVID in this, but it's pretty hard to separate some of them, but we tried to stay true to it. We also are very keen on spending the remainder of our grant to make sure that we leave nothing on the table, and at the same time make sure that we spend it judiciously so that we are within the confines of the grant. And so far, I think we've done that pretty well, or we've done it well, I should say well. At the beginning of the summer, we had about $160,000 that we still had to spend on it. We also stayed true to our keeping with long-term positive things that we look at as infrastructure that will be changing things for the whole town going forward, and for the general prosperity of the business community and the community, especially for the whole community. So recognizing that COVID-19 gave us a few extra challenges, we still were able to do quite a few really good promotions, and we just kind of had to pull our creative juices out of our hats and just do the best we could with it. So we are going to go forward. Karen's going to go through most of this because it's really important for you to remember that, as I said, infrastructure and making sure that this was going to be staying with the town going forward as a positive thing. The way to do that is through the one entity we have, which is the Better Middlebury Partnership, and through experiencemiddlebury.com. So everything that we've done, hopefully, will be able to be going forward. So go for it, Karen.
Okay, so if you guys remember, we told you that we were going to be continuing to focus on our digital media marketing efforts, which we have done. So a big push in the beginning of this grant was getting the website up and going. We really wanted to create a community calendar. Of course, there are very limited events right now, no events. So we had to start being creative about ways to keep the Experience Middlebury website in people's mind as an option. And so we started looking towards social media and avenues that we could continue to direct folks to the website. We started an Experience Middlebury YouTube channel, and then we started doing video tours of the businesses, and started with downtown, and we've actually started to expand out beyond the downtown. I embedded this, but then sent Kathleen a PDF for this. So if you guys haven't yet had a chance, please go to the Experience Middlebury YouTube channel and check out some of the videos that we've created. There's some really good ones, and I think the merchants are starting to get into it, and it's been fun as a way to sort of offer people a look into the stores that maybe they're not going into as often. So we've really wanted to keep up with the digital marketing, and I think we've laid a really good foundation for going forward with that. And then just to note, as we scroll to the next slide, the digital media will continue through, in terms of Neighbors Together expenses, will continue through the end of the grant, which is the end of June. And then Nancy will talk about Middlebury money.
Yeah, Middlebury money obviously was started before the Rail and Bridge project, but we tried to take it and build it up a notch and did a lot of work promoting it amongst our businesses, first of all, to get them on board, have them understand what it is, as well as, and have them participate, and to promote it the best we could. To that end, we used it in a lot of things with incentivizing, with local spending, and so that was a way to get more money out there. It was a win-win. It got Middlebury money into the hands of people that were out spending it in whatever way they chose, and then it also got back to the businesses. So that was really a very positive thing. In that regard, we realized that we used an awful lot of the Middlebury money, and so we also went about and redesigned it and ordered more to have on hand. So we do have a good supply, which is at the National Bank of Middlebury. It's not in our back pockets, so it's safely put there. We also, this is the second year that we sent out a letter to area businesses, large and small. We expanded it. It went to 250 businesses this year. encouraging or at least planting the seed that Middlebury money might be a good way to do bonuses for employees or recognitions for volunteers or gifts or things like that. So that's so far, I think we've seen a big uptick, especially last year when we did it in the December, January, February time, especially January and February when that is typically a pretty slow month for retail businesses, and the amount of Middlebury money that came in, which was a direct result of it getting out in December through either businesses distributing it to their own employees or from our incentive program. So it works. And so we want to be able to continue that.
One thing we've also seen with Middlebury money is as we get the tracking information from the National Bank of Middlebury every quarter, it used to be that it was really spent in the downtown, and now we're seeing it being spent at a wide variety of businesses all around town. So it's exciting to see the program grow in that way as well, and really be more of an asset to more businesses. So if you guys remember, we originally were planning on doing Wednesday nights throughout the closure as like a mini block party with food and promotions and music and all kinds of fun stuff. And of course that went by the wayside in March. And so we reimagined what kind of support we could give to the businesses during that closure period that could happen either online or virtually or in person, depending on someone's comfort level. And so we created 6 promotions, which included prizes of local products as well as Middlebury money, and they were pretty heavily advertised locally. And they took place in that June through September timeframe. Those included the gift card challenge, the Great Middlebury Pig Out, Show Your Middlebury Love, Hidden Gems, the big giveaway, and Fair Food Week. So I've got some more data to share on the next slide about those. So one thing that was great about doing it this way is that we had real information to gather in terms of receipts coming back to us. So we could actually see the financial impact that we were having on the local businesses and the regional economy just by doing these promotions. And so take a look through these. You can kind of see which ones tended to do a little bit better. I was a little surprised that the Pig Out didn't have more, but I think that you have to also take into account not everybody, that ate out entered their receipt. But these are the actual totals that we have receipts for. So when we add it all up, including the advertising, and then add a little bit that we know is out there that we didn't have receipts for, we can really conservatively estimate that these promotions generated at least $100,000 of impact in Middlebury in the course of the summer. So it just kind of goes to show that, people want to support their community and they just want the opportunity to do so. And so it was really fun to be a part of these and sort of facilitate that for people. One thing I want to just mention really quick is Hidden Gems this summer, actually out of all of these from a social media perspective, was by far the largest reach that I've ever had on social media. It was shared as far away as England, all over the country. It had over 20,000 people that saw it. And literally, I started to worry at one point that people were thinking we were hiding actual gems in Middlebury, because I was like, why is this so popular? And I just, as an anecdote, I went out numerous times to hide these little gems. And on more than one occasion turned around behind me to see little kids following me around town, scooping them up after me so they could turn them in for their $10 in Middlebury money. So that's definitely one that we're going to repeat again, just because it was clearly a winner. So anyway, there was a lot that came out of this, and some of it was just feel good, and some of it was real, impact. So Bundle, last we spoke, was on pause, mostly because we just couldn't justify continuing to pay rent for an event space that we weren't hosting events in. So Kelly and I spent a lot of time really trying to reimagine what Bundle could look like. And she came up with some really great ideas and ran with them. And so we've really adapted Bundle to be an outdoor type of space. Using tents, creative placemaking. We'll likely be looking at some heaters if we can find any. And then really working to continue to build the community partnerships. I want to just mention over the weekend, we had a Bundle Up event. She's kind of come up with some creative names for some of these outdoor things, and used the Merchants Row space. So we blocked off the parking on Merchants Row, and vendors lined just up to the sidewalk. So there were there's plenty of room between the Battelle building and the vendor. And it was a really, I don't know if anybody got a chance to go down, but really good event because it felt safe. It was really, Kelly did a great job of making sure that the vendors were spaced really far apart and that the rules were very clearly stated. And of course, everyone in Middlebury at this point kind of gets the gist. The vendors were so happy with how this event went. We're doing another one on December 3rd, hopefully. And this is something that, the thing that I wanted to mention about this event is this is just a vendor market. It's great. It brought more people downtown. They went into the stores. But out of this, 2 people ended up walking through some of the open storefronts in the Battelle block out of interest in potentially renting some of the space, just because of what Kelly had going on right there and her sort of driving them to take a look at it. So even though it's outside and it's different than what it was, it's still doing all of the things that we hoped Bundle would do. So I think there's kind of no limit to this as a concept, and we're learning that all the time. This is just some stats for Bundle that I wanted to share with you. Of note, we had an artisan market the weekend that the downtown reopened. And we had 875 people attend the artisan market, which was on Riverfront Park over the course of several hours. And vendors were also really pleased, but so were many of the merchants in the area. And it just kind of showed what these kinds of events can do for the downtown, and we definitely want to continue that. And then under the umbrella of Bundle, we have a very exciting project coming up called Find Your Wings. And this is going to be a public art project in the downtown space, which is intended to build community partnerships and facilitate that investment that we talked about a little bit last week. We also see this as serving as an economic driver and a tool in the downtown revitalization efforts. So essentially what Find Your Wings would be a solicitation of local artists to create sets of wings that would be then constructed and placed in different locations around town. We will be working really closely with town staff and have already started that process on exactly how this needs to go. And I just want to note one thing about this, even though it is a Bundle project, the artist fee and some of the other expenses for this will be covered by the BMP through grants that we're applying for, as well as sponsorships of the individual pieces, just so that we're clear about that. The Bundle component of this will really cover Kelly's time, project managing, and things like that. And we're looking to have this installed in the spring. As you remember, we were looking at doing a big push to attract visitors. And of course, we had to really reimagine what that looked like safely as well. So we focused our efforts here on offering up staycation options this summer and through the fall and even now to Vermonters. We also did some New England placement and some, there was I don't know if anybody gets newengland.com's newsletter, but just this week there was a big article about Middlebury in it. And what we were trying to do is really plant the seeds for a future visit. So even though some of the things that we highlighted, like the tasting trail, some of those businesses are not open to visitors right now, we were just trying to get people thinking about Middlebury as a future destination. And frankly, it's just this isn't necessarily the best time to be promoting Middlebury to a tourism-based audience, but our hands are a little bit tied if we, within the grant parameters, we really couldn't wait until it was the right time if we wanted to do this kind of marketing work. So we really tried to frame the message in a really specific way. We're also advertising currently on VPR, again, mostly to Vermonters. So, we really just tried to change our approach here in a way that made it feel safe to everybody involved. And then a couple more pieces just to mention. The last time we talked, we have created a Middlebury guide, and this will be sort of a good groundwork for Jen if the downtown grant comes through for additional marketing efforts. Some of this work has now already begun, and so we can sort of build on it. But this guide was created, and a first run was done in the summer and distributed to the businesses, and then we'll do a second printing of this in the spring with some edits that are necessary. And then we did a lot of local advertising of all of the things that we did this summer. So we really put a lot into local radio, local print, local or social media reach, things like that. So, there was a lot of impact, I think, that was made on a local level in terms of advertising this year.
And a lot of I'm sure all of you saw some of the mobility pieces that was part of the mobility committee, but Neighbors Together played a major part in it. And we helped distribute and put out where the pedestrian signs were downtown and the parking signs. Rotary got involved and they were terrific and helped us paint on the sidewalks. And then also the large signs that were around that were encouraging vehicular traffic as far as how to go, as well as letting them know that downtown was still open for business. So that was all really, really important. Those signs will be coming down, I would say, any day now, the big ones, as we move on into the next season, so to speak, and put that big, the hole in the ground out of our minds as we move forward, which is a great place to be. So I guess, we kind of say, so what is next? And our majority of our efforts between now and the end of the actual project, which is slated, as far as we know now, June 30th, 2021, and our grant goes through then, is to still try to do our best revitalizing downtown and the surrounding areas. Bundle will still be going. We're still going to be doing the visitor-driven marketing and the digital marketing and working with Middlebury money. And of course, the Experience Middlebury website has to be maintained and be creative and be in front of us or everybody as much as possible, and enticing people to want to be downtown and be a part of it, and not only downtown, but all of Middlebury. So, as we mentioned in the beginning, everything that we've done, we see it as playing it forward, and that it will still continue through Better Middlebury Partnership, Experience Middlebury, and all that. So that's where we are.
Well, thanks for the update. We appreciate all the work that the BMP and Neighbors Together have been doing on trying to drive business downtown. The new slug in COVID is not helping our cause.
No, and yeah, sadly, and I don't think I did announce this last week, but really sadly, we're not going to be able to have Midnight Stroll this year.
Oh.
So I'm really bummed about that one, but we are looking at replicating some things online and doing some fun stuff. So I've got a slate of all of the holiday things that are coming out. But one of the things that we're working on is how we maybe can reimagine the Middlebury money giveaways that we normally use for Midnight Stroll as another type of an incentive during the same period. So we're kind of constantly evaluating and then reevaluating and adapting, and as are everybody else this year. So this has definitely been among one of the biggest professional challenges that I've ever had, trying to figure out how to continue to support and market a business, or market with the idea of keeping people apart as opposed to bringing them together. And I'm really proud of the work that this group did. One thing that Nancy didn't mention at the very end was, I think sort of sums up this Neighbors Together stakeholder group. A group of the volunteers donned these yellow aprons. They called themselves the Apron Brigade.
Apron Brigade.
And they went around to downtown stores on a weekly basis all summer and just offered to sweep out their storefront, area, or water their flowers, or just checked in to see if they could grab their mail or whatever it was. And to me, that was just so summed up Middlebury, it was very feel good.
Well, actually, in the Apron Brigade, the aprons were originally purchased with the idea that those in the information booth would be wearing them and they'd be identified. And when we were going to be doing random acts of kindness, handing things out, people wouldn't think they were being accosted by some strange wacko. So we said, okay, we have these yellow aprons. What can we do? And so they just felt the need that the merchants needed to know that they weren't forgotten. And we were down there, and it was also a way to disseminate information to them at the same time. So you're right. Thank you, Karen. And the other thing is 2021, the summer, we are looking forward to a celebration for when this entire thing is over. And now we will also, besides the rail and bridge project being done, hopefully COVID will be pretty much behind us too. So we can truly celebrate. So let's hold that thought.
Okay, well, thank you for everything you are doing, and please pass it on to the rest of your teams.
It's a great team.
We got to move on here.
Yes, thank you guys.
Thanks. All right. Bye.
Okay. Chris, could you get Jim in with us?
Clearing the screen here. Okay, Jim, you should be coming up.
Good evening, Jim.
Hey guys, how are you?
Good.
Good. It's good to see everyone. A little dark here, but all anyhow. So, well, as you heard from Nancy and Karen, community's done a remarkable job of managing through the project this year. This was the tough year for us on the construction front. Right now, we're slowly winding down construction downtown. And it looks like we'll wrap up work before the end of the year here. And then next year, final year of construction, there's still quite a bit of work to do to complete Triangle Park and build the new Lazarus Park, repave, do a final paving of Main Street, Merchants Row, and finish the rail corridor. The contractual end of the project is July 1st. That'll be extended another 7 weeks to make up for the 7 weeks that we lost early this spring due to the virus. But I would expect that much of the work will be done by the time we hit early summer here. And I'll have more details about that next year. So, but for this year, tonight I'm here to ask the Select Board to approve a $7,500 contribution toward an upgrade in the paving plan for Printers Alley. And I laid out the kind of the rationale for that in your agenda notes here. But the bottom line is that the decision was made to reconfigure the 5-foot section along the Duclos building to granite curbing and granite pavers, so it would complement the hardscape that's in our 2 new parks and on Main Street. You can see that in the photograph here. Federal highway funding was not available for the upgrade. And so in going over the cost with VTrans has agreed to kick in $7,500, half of the $15,000 cost to upgrade the area. And so I've come to the town, to the Select Board to ask for your approval to contribute an equal amount, $7,500, so that we can upgrade that stretch and have kind of a common look to our new park, Printers Alley, and Main Street.
Questions from the board?
No, this makes sense to me is let's just, we're doing this job so well, let's just get it right all the way. So I'd move to approve the town contribution of $7,500 to offset the cost of installing granite pavers along the 5-foot wide strip of land in Printers Alley owned by the National Bank of Middlebury and abutting the Duclos building as an upgrade to the exposed aggregate currently planned for the site.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any comments or questions?
I just had a quick one.
Yeah.
Is it the bank that's wanting the change? I mean, this is something the bank is wanting?
Yeah, the National Bank first approached us about when they saw the pavers go in, Lindsay, they thought, well, it would look better to have a common look there. And so, V-Trans and the engineer all took a look at that and agreed that that was the best path forward. So, but it did initiate with the National Bank asking if it were possible.
And is this going to, you mentioned, the notes mention, controlling the water flow through that area. Is it going to divert water or just slow down the seepage or?
Yeah, the idea was we went to the hardscape paving in the first place so that there wouldn't be any water penetration into the Duclos building itself. But there are 2 sets of granite curbing running from Main Street down into the Marble Works area that will kind of channel the water down through there. I think it'll be a real improvement over what we've seen in the past in Printers Alley.
Okay.
Okay, good comments. Any other questions or comments? All right. All in favor of supporting the motion signify with a thumbs up. Okay, Jim, you can let them know the good news.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Jim.
Yep, bye-bye.
Bye. So when we go into the renewal of lease agreement for the recreation park with the Addison Central School District, and the town's 25-year lease with the school district number 4, now ACSD, for recreation park expires on December 31st of this year. And the lease memorialized the intent of both parties at the time of executing in 1995 to renew the lease for 2 25-year terms and 1 successive 24-year term, which was Article 2, and specified that the leased land would be maintained and operated for public outdoor recreation uses in perpetuity, consistent with applicable Department of Interior National Park Services regulations, which is Article 5. And the board is being asked this evening to authorize Town Manager Kathleen Ramsey to begin discussions with ACSD representatives toward renewing the lease for a second 25-year term with any amendments to the current terms and conditions that the Select Board would like to propose, if any. And Kathleen, a question, is there anything that has come forward from Dustin and his team that they would like to have considered?
I think that's going to be my first step, is getting a hold of Dustin, seeing what any difficulties that he's had with the agreement or can see any clarifications, and reach out to the school for the same.
Okay. Nick?
Kathleen, and just to clarify, this is for the Mary Hogan?
Right, the rec park fields, yeah.
Okay, one of the things I'd like to ask you to, as you're going through this, and if you recall, those of us who were around during the town office recreation building project, we did have some difficulties trying to advance, because at the time the recreation building was proposed for that area. And then we ran into some real difficulties in communications and setting protocols as to how to make the project move on, and subsequently ended up relocating. In 25 years, the odds are pretty good we're going to need to do something with some of those recreation facilities over there. So I'd like to try to at least establish a protocol for how we collectively, the school district and the town would review and advance things. I mean, so that we don't run into a similar bog down again, and we can do it in an efficient manner. Other than that, thanks for the work.
Okay. Heather?
It does say, the lease does say maintain and operated for public outdoor recreation uses. So I don't know that we can we even consider changing the agreement in the original lease to include for something? I'm assuming Nick's referring to like indoor public recreation uses.
I'm referring to that which we don't know, but I want to make sure we don't run into a similar bind. Because again, we were faced with something that was arguably different from what the language was, but didn't seem unworkable, but it just became more cumbersome than it should have. So I think we want to just be prepared for what could happen in 25 years. I don't want to find out that, future board members on either side are locked into a scenario where we're stumbling over language rather than being able to advance what could be a fundamentally good idea. So
Heather, that wording about the outdoor recreation piece was the result of a grant that we received for the improvement of the fields and the warming hut. And so I'll have to see what applicability that may still have for that property.
Okay.
Any other comments?
I guess if I could just make one more comment, Brian, I just don't want to do anything that jeopardizes our opportunity to continue that lease. So just, not that I think that there would be, I just, I guess just proceed cautiously and get input from the school on what they're willing to, allow there or not allow there, and go from.
Okay, I think that's generally the intent here, so. Nick?
well, that is the intent, and but also there was some discussion about what NPS would not allow, and I would say that in the process, at least getting their current read wouldn't be a bad thing to have, and clarify that, because I don't think it was such a difficult issue, but it did add some complications.
Okay. Would anybody care to make the motion?
I'll make a motion to authorize Town Manager Kathleen Ramsey to begin discussions with ACSD representatives towards renewing the town's lease for Recreation Park for a second 25-year term.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded, and I would just say that if anything comes up as you think about it or in your discussions, let's make sure it gets to Kathleen, because she would be the one working on trying to identify all those, and she'll be getting input from staff and the school as well as they work through this. Any questions or comments on what we're voting on? Okay, all in favor of the motion, signify with a thumbs up. Okay, sounds good. The next was the board's approach on advancing race equity and inclusion. It was basically a placeholder. We haven't received Lisa Ryan's proposal yet, but if anybody had any comments they'd like to make at this point before we move to the next. Okay, then I'm going to move on. We'll pass it over to Kathleen to talk about year-to-date budget reports.
Sure. Briefly, don't have a lot of updates since our last meeting. I would note that Town Treasurer Jackie Sullivan says that tax collections for the first installment have been coming in strong. So it'll be nice to see how we compare to last year's first collection at this time. Should have that in the next week or so. Would note that library expenses are down by about $53,000 compared to last year at this time. And their revenue is also down by $6,500 compared to this last year at this time. Recreation expense is down by $10,000 and their revenue is down by $53,000.
You gotta get that building fixed.
Those are the highlights of the general fund budget. Not a lot to report on the other budgets, but to note that water and sewer revenues similarly are looking good. Our maintenance of mains contract services for the water department is already overspent at $113,000 on an $85,000 budget. So, and that is it for the budget reports.
Okay. Budget timeline?
Budget timeline. So I'm looking to, everything is on track for a December 2nd posting of the first draft of the budget online for you to review in advance of the December 8th meeting, when we'll take our first deep dive in reviewing the budget. Would note that the department heads have submitted basically level funded budgets for your consideration, with the exception of wages and benefits. So December 8th, we're going to have a budget overview, including major drivers, a detailed review of the general administration, library, public safety, DPW, including recreation and health and human service agency requests. December 15th, continued review of the departmental and agency budget requests. And the board would warn the FY22 budget hearing for your regular meeting on January 12th.
Okay. Thanks, Kathleen.
I also sent out this afternoon some preliminary major drivers, just to get you thinking about what is looking, some things that we always know we have to grapple with. Wages, cost of living, and minimum wage increases are also a factor driving that $70,000 increase in wages. Employment benefits, except for workers' comp, $17,900 projected increase. We had projected a 10% increase in health insurance premiums, and that was more on the 5% scale this year. Workers' comp, we continue to have poor accident experience with some major claims ongoing, as we've discussed before, not for particularly safety issues that we can address, but some of these are having to do with police officer accidents in the line of duty. Property and casualty insurance, we've also had some significant claims that are currently in the matter of being resolved. This would be our first year of the PD reuse bond. We had talked last year about doing a 7-year bond to minimize the interest expense on that. Of course, things were a lot rosier then, so we may want to reconsider our financing strategy for that. But that said, we did talk about tapping the local option tax to make that a bond payment. Same with the flood resiliency bond. You'll see that that's significantly less That's because we won't be bonding for that until next year, because we're going to be going to construction next summer. So we'll bond next December. So that's just a small interest payment. The county tax is going to have a big bump, as it did this year when the effects of our reappraisal, where we compare our grand list to other towns in the county, we did see an increase there. We heard from the Better Middlebury Partnership that they're asking for a $5,000 increase. And you also heard from the library of their request to go fine-free. So all of those things, not excluding other incidental increases that we may have and the equipment fund, total up to just under $300,000 at a grand list of 9.6 million. That's about a 3-cent increase on the tax rate.
Okay, we'll be grappling with this for the first time on December 8th, I guess. Dan, check warrants.
Yes, I move to approve the total expenditures in the amount of $414,453.44, consisting of $414,453.44 for accounts payable and 0 for payroll for the period of November 11, 2020 through November 17, 2020.
Second.
All in favor, signify with a thumbs up. No payroll this period. Kathleen, back to you.
Okay, so we have, always like to see people whenever we can. So here we have the American Legion presenting a check for $2,750 to Dustin Hunt here over on the left, Greg Polioli here, Dustin again, and Scott Bourne of our Recreation Department. The American Legion has traditionally been the major contributor. Our fireworks display is typically $3,250, and the American Legion brings the lion's share of that. So we thank them, and the board has signed a letter to that effect. We also had an inquiry from the Turning Point Center about the status of National Prescription Opiate Litigation Fund distribution, and that is still working its way through settlement processes and is a way off. I think they were hopeful that they could receive some additional funding through the town from that settlement, if any, to help them meet some budget challenges. In my research, I found that this would not be forthcoming soon, and may be trickled out over a number of years. So the Turning Point Center has that information and may be back to you with a separate request for increased funding. And I asked them if that's something they're considering to get to us sooner rather than later. And then finally, we have a request from the Addison County Community Trust, who owns and operates the Lindale Mobile Home Park, for a letter of support from the town endorsing their request to refinance or restructure their debt. I did a draft of a letter of support, and I'm asking you, since there's a fairly quick turnaround time on this, to authorize me to sign it on behalf of the town.
Pleasure of the board.
Make a motion to authorize Town Manager Kathleen Ramsey to sign a letter of support for Lindale, for refinancing Lindale Mobile Home Park. Well, that's it.
Second.
All in favor, signify with thumbs up. Okay. All right, so I guess we'll go to board member concerns. Dan?
I don't have any. Thank you.
Thank you. Farhad?
I got nothing.
Okay. Nick?
I think I've talked enough tonight, so I have nothing else to add.
Heather?
Let's keep that going.
I just briefly would like to echo what Tom Hanley said about the college and their handling of the COVID. I know when the college was considering bringing students back, there was a lot of concern and call for not bringing the students back. And I think the college deserves kudos from the town and the community at managing that really well. And I know they had a couple of positive cases today. But I just think they've done an extremely good job and deserve some credit for that. And I know Tom mentioned it earlier, so I just want to echo what he said.
Thanks, Heather. I think we all join you on that. Lindsay?
Yeah, my only thought as we were talking about, how we're going to run town meeting is I just want to throw out, Kathleen's probably already on it, but we do have a couple of people who use ASL, and I want to be sure if we wind up in a remote situation that they can still have an interpreter.
Yeah. Okay. So we have need for an executive session. Heather, could you take us into executive session here?
Sure. Did I unmute myself? Okay. In accordance with Vermont's open meeting law requirements, I move that the board find that premature general knowledge of the consideration of real estate matters would clearly place the select board at a substantial disadvantage because the select board risks disclosing its litigation strategy if it discusses the real estate matters in public.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor? Thumbs up.
I further move that the board enter into executive session to discuss real estate matters under the provisions of Title I, Section 313A1 of the Vermont statutes.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor? Thumbs up. Okay, we're going to move into executive session at 9:23.